Jackie, welcome back to the Scholarship GPS podcast. I think this is your third time with us. But for those who have not heard you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dave. It is such a pleasure to be back. So, my name is Jackie Pollina. I am the co-founder and owner of J&J Test Prep. So, our bread and butter, as you can probably guess, is all things standardized tests, so SATs and ACTs. And we offer a bunch of options to help get students from point A to point B so they can get into schools, get some scholarship money, and go on their merry way to college.
That's awesome. I don't know if you've ever mentioned this. How long have you been in the test prep space?
That's a wonderful question. So J&J Test Prep was officially started, incorporated around 8 years ago, but I have been doing test prep since I was like 15 or 16. So
Wow, okay.
it's always been like my job, if you will,
Uh-huh.
throughout high school, college, and then after college. That's where my partner Josh and I we officially founded J&J.
That's awesome. Great. Well, yeah, I mean, you have such a great reputation in the industry, and you are one of my go-tos to point people when they're looking to bump their test score. So glad to have you back. What I wanted to do today was essentially reverse engineer the test prep and the piece of that is college admissions and scholarships process. But maybe before we even get to that, let's talk at a more basic level, like why should students even take or care about the SAT or the ACT?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Dave. So I think with parents and students hearing this test optional era, it creates a ton of confusion.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate consequence of t test optional in the era that we're in. So the SAT and ACT, why are schools reinstating it? What is really going on and why are they important? So I think it's first important that we understand the test optional. While many schools will still continue to be test optional, the pendulum is clearly swinging in the other direction. And we can see schools going back. And these are the Ivy League schools, Harvard and Columbia, right, who said that they
Mhm.
were not going to be requiring tests, miraculously all of a sudden are requiring test scores. And this is not just for Ivy League schools. I want to make that exceedingly clear. This
Yeah.
is for, you know what I mean, University of Alabama, University of Miami. We're talking about LSU. So a lot of schools, Vanderbilt just went back. We're seeing a ton of schools going back to requiring
Mhm.
tests because they want to know where where their incoming students are at, because that's going to determine their graduation rates, their
Yep.
success in their school. So first and foremost, these tests are important because they easily could be required for your student, especially if you have a sophomore or junior right now. We don't know
Mhm.
what the future will bring.
Yep.
But beyond just a pure admissions perspective, I think it's really important that we understand, speaking of scholarships, the scholarship implications of these
Yeah.
tests because it cannot be understated. So, when it comes to standardized tests, a lot of schools, you can get your foot in the door, like you can get into the school, but then you're going to be hit with a $70,000 price tag.
Yeah. Yep.
So a lot of these schools require a score to even be considered for merit money of any degree. So you
Yep.
need to have a score and presumably a strong enough score, in order to get some sort of merit money.
Yep.
So getting into some schools, getting merit money at many schools. And there are many other reasons to take these tests, including, getting out of particular freshman prereqs like writing and math. You
Mhm.
can graduate earlier. That's something that I personally took advantage of. So that was
Yeah.
really great. So getting out of prereqs, particular majors might require it, like nursing, BSMD, architecture, kind of those more specialized majors might need it, even if the school
Mhm.
doesn't. So my biggest piece of advice is better safe than sorry. Like there are 1,000 reasons why you might need a score and you don't even know what your college list is, or even if you do, what that college is going to change to in a year from now. So
Yeah.
it really is better to have the scores and not use them than vice versa, because
Sure.
the senior panic, it happens every year. Like it
Yep.
really does. And
Yeah.
it's going to keep happening because I think of the confusion with test
Yeah.
option.
Yep. Yeah. Well, obviously. what's near and dear to my heart is that scholarship piece. And I've worked with a number of students who have gotten full tuition because of their SAT or ACT score. I've had students who got in-state tuition for an out-of-state school because of their test scores. And lots of students that I've worked with maybe didn't get full tuition because of it, but they got a really nice scholarship because of their test scores. So yeah, it's from a financial perspective, I always tell people that um, test prep is one of the biggest potential ROIs that your student will
Yes.
have in terms of financial investment and investment of time. And I can't overstate how important it can be for many, maybe even most students.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, when you realize 150 points can be the difference of like $25,000 a year in
Hmm.
scholarships, or like
Yeah.
100,000 over a lifetime in college, it's, test prep isn't cheap, but $25,000 a year potentially is an incredible ROI,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I talk about like the hourly wage of students who are applying for scholarships, and my son's was over $300 an hour, and that I'm talking about not just the time he spent for the ones he won, but the time he spent on the ones he
Wow.
didn't win. And I have students who've exceeded that, but that test prep ROI is even higher than that. So, or at least it can be. So yeah, I think it's just really incredibly important. Um, all right, so let's take for granted then that taking the SAT and ACT and getting a good score is important. Let's get into that kind of reverse engineering. What should be the goal for a student to get their best final test score? Like, is there a timeline in the college prep process that you would say this is the ideal time you want to have the score that you want to submit?
Yes, and that's a wonderful question. So I'm going to break this down into three situations, sort of,
Okay.
because there are really three different scenarios to consider here. The first being for students who are applying early decision or early action, so ED or EA.
Mhm.
For students in that situation, they're going to need to have scores sometime mid to late October, mid to late November, whatever that, or early November, whatever that looks like for the particular school. So
Yeah.
ideally, at that point, we're talking, the September and October exams being the final test dates that you can take in order
Okay.
to submit scores in a timely
Mhm.
fashion.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you're applying regular decision, that usually means a January 1st deadline, which means exams through December are all contenders as well.
Okay.
Something worth pointing out, though, is for some schools, you can keep applying for merit scholarships through test scores until move-in day. So if that's the case for you, you might want to keep testing throughout senior year because you're into the school. Now it's just a matter of cracking down at the amount of money
Yeah.
that you can get. But for
Yep.
a lot of seniors, like the vast majority, we're going to want to ideally have scores by October. Like, I wouldn't want to extend and bleed too much because now we're getting a little risky. And you might have some schools you're applying to early, some regular, and you're going to need
Hmm.
to have those scores ready and primed.
Yeah. Yep. So you kind of answered my next question, which was going to be if for people who don't hit those ideal time frames, like it may not be too late, right?
Yeah, it absolutely may not be too late. And that's what I always emphasize. And sometimes schools will accept scores a little bit after that official, like they'll give you a grace period with the window.
Hmm.
You can, in many cases, keep testing and it will be, okay. That's what
Yeah.
I always suggest. So ideally, like in an ideal world, if I could kind of have my little,
Hmm.
my little snow globe and do everything that I wanted, the summer before senior year is ideally the time that you want to be doing the prep such that you can finish in September and October. And if you could finish in August, even better, like the August right before you go into senior year or, right starting senior year.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
the ideal time because if you have that full summer to get prep done, you can be done and have everything locked and loaded by early fall. So if that is a possibility, that's what I would recommend. And of course, I don't always, it's not always the earlier the better because there is a point that is too early, which
Hmm.
we can talk about. But ideally, you don't want to be waiting until applications are due and just hoping that score is good enough because then you don't know what it's going to be and you got to send that.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that's one of the things I was gonna kind of mention, like maybe from a more practical perspective, while those kind of fall into early winter timeframes might be okay. You like you said, you don't know what your score is going to be, and so you want to give yourself some leeway to retest if needed. But the other thing is, when the Common App opens, it's a mad rush, and there's a lot to do with writing essays, applying to colleges, applying for scholarships. Plus, school has started. So you're the expert here, but like, would it be even better for students to get their best score before the start of their senior year?
Absolutely. Like if that is like I want to stress two things that there's an ideal scenario and there's a don't freak out, we could still
Yeah.
help you type of scenario
Yeah.
because
Yep.
in an ideal world, absolutely, Dave, you will want scores before the chaos of senior year begins.
Hmm.
I mean, think about how much our students are doing. They're, submitting essays, filling out applications, getting teacher recs. You know what I mean? There's so many aspects that they're already going to need to handle on the application side. This is something that can be taken care of in advance. Have that score locked in
Hmm.
and get everything done by July, August. And that's setting yourself up truly for the most success.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so is there kind of a milestone or a trigger that you would say students and parents can know, okay, now it's time for us to start prepping, maybe even taking our first SAT or ACT?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So we call this the golden algebra 2 rule. So basically, once a student is halfway through algebra 2, that means that they are ready to start officially testing. So
Hmm.
algebra 2 is really our foundation because that there's so much math, especially on the SAT, but really the SAT and ACT that is based on algebra 2. So if your student, usually this falls sophomore or junior year, depending on if your student is in like the regular or advanced version of their math track, but once you have half of Algebra 2, you're good to go. There's a tiny bit covered in the second half of Algebra 2 that comes up on the test, but it's not enough that I would say that it's worthwhile to continue waiting when we can begin racking up the vast majority of the points at that point. So, what I will say is you should start thinking about testing though before this Algebra 2 halfway checkpoint, though, because
Okay.
before this, you can take diagnostics, you can figure out if your team SAT or ACT. Once you're halfway done with Algebra 2, that's the point where I want us to hit the ground running and get
Hmm.
going. That's not the
Hmm.
point where, oh my goodness, now testing is on the horizon, should be, the thought.
Yeah. Yep. Obviously these tests cover more than math. Is there an English or English language arts milestone the same as there is for Algebra 2?
Candidly, like I wish I could say yes, but the answer is no. I mean, honestly, English classes vary so much, and I've just found that for whatever reason, grammar has been largely excluded from high school English
Mm.
curriculum.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. I wish I
Hmm.
could change that, but I mean, reading skills are something that's acquired over the long haul, so it's not like there's any distinct checkpoint on the English side. So, no.
Yeah. Well, that brings up something that you've mentioned before, and I've heard other test prep experts say. And there's like this one simple hack that kids can do starting really at any time that's going to improve their test scores, and that is simply reading, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And I think students and parents hear that and they're like, "Oh, of course, like that's just like the, you know what I mean, the band-aid to put on the problem." But it
Hmm.
really genuinely isn't. I probably would be able to I think with good confidence I could sit down in front of a student and tell you who is a reader and who is not just
Hmm.
from talking to them for 10 minutes and getting them to answer questions. It is so apparent the vocab you subconsciously pick up on the grammar and the vocabulary
Yeah.
as you read. And I
Yep.
just want to be clear, like this does not have to be reading like bland text. Like you
Yeah.
can read anything that you want. Just make sure
Yep.
that it's at a level that is challenging to you
Hmm.
and it will benefit you immensely. So yes, if I could get a t-shirt that said read, 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 I surely would.
Yeah, yep. And you mentioned that for whatever reason, schools aren't really teaching grammar much anymore. Simply reading, like you said, even if it's kind of subconsciously, students are going to pick up on these rules of how to use commas and punctuation and pick up on their vocabulary. So yeah, absolutely. Um, so, people are pretty familiar with the SAT and the ACT, but there's also something called the PSAT. What is that, and how does that fit in with this bigger picture of preparing for these tests?
hmm That's a wonderful question. So the PSAT takes on a few different forms. So if you have a student in eighth or ninth grade, they might be taking the PSAT 8 and 9. Then there's the PSAT 10, that's offered in 10th grade. But I want to stress that for grades 8 through 10, the PSAT, I don't ever want to say doesn't matter because there are some private schools where, going into ninth grade, they want to see something. But for 99% of
Mhm.
circumstances, I still suggest having your student, don't opt out of it. Have them sit there and take it and get used to standardized testing
Yeah.
because I guarantee you that will pay huge dividends
Mhm.
when it comes time to actually take these tests. But don't prepare for it or place much weight on it. It's that PSAT in 11th grade. NMSQT that really is the one that matters. So when I say that it matters, I want to convey something that's important. It matters in the sense that you can qualify for scholarship money and gain recognition. But the real important asterisk I'd place there is that this is only if you're scoring like in like the 99th percentile.
Yeah. Yep.
So a lot of parents will be like, my student is starting at a 1050. Should we prep for the PSAT? And to go from a 1050, you know what I mean, to trying to get a 1490 out of 1520 on the PSAT, like it's going to be very challenging. So what I
Hmm.
always suggest to parents is when they ask, should I prepare for the PSAT? And their student is, in the right grad year and they are obviously with the right math, I would say yes, because it's a two birds, one stone type of
Right.
approach. The PSAT and in 11th grade and the SAT are identical in content, timing, format, literally everything other than the scoring metric.
Hmm.
So when preparing, you may as well prepare for the PSAT and then take the fall test right after. It's like the easiest way to do two things at the same time. So
Hmm.
even if your student isn't going to qualify to be a national merit contender, that's okay. Use this just as the opportunity to get the ball rolling with prep and to start knocking out tests.
Yeah, I love that outlook on it. The kill the two birds with one stone type philosophy. And also, just from my perspective on the scholarship side, sure, National Merit Scholarship is fantastic, but I think there are some people out there that overstate its
Yes.
maybe importance. There's only a handful of schools that give you anything for it, and even fewer than that it's anything of significance. So yeah, if your student's in the running for it, absolutely try to get that. It's going to give your students more options, potentially reducing your cost. But ultimately, the SAT is more likely to provide scholarship value than the PSAT for the vast majority of students. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely
Yeah.
fair to say. Like the big money, like when I was talking before about the extra $25,000 a year, that's coming from the school seeing your SAT or ACT score.
Yeah.
It's not PSAT, and saying like, wow, you know what I mean? Like if it's an automatic scholarship, that just comes to you directly, or if it's something where test scores are part of the criteria, that's
Hmm.
saying like, wow, based on your test scores and whatever other aspects in your profile, we want to give you, and that's where the thousands and tens of thousands come out. That's not really through the PSAT. So
Yeah.
yes,
Yep.
if something mattered
Um,
more, it's definitely the SAT and the ACT instead of the PSAT. If I could just
yeah.
frame that in terms of
Yep.
the ROI
Yeah.
of,
Yep. But yeah, like you said, preparing for the PSAT, there's still value in it, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the National Merit Scholarship. Yeah. Tell us how you and your team work with students and families.
yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I really am a big believer, Dave, in meeting a family where they are at because everybody, you know what I mean? When we come into a family's life and they're dealing with so many things with high school and the students in driver's ed and sports and
Mhm.
extracurriculars and mom and dad are running, trying to get dinner on, like it's a very hectic time. And I really mean that. Like we're trying to work with a family. So regardless of starting score, regardless of whatever it is, we want to work with your family. You know, it doesn't matter if you can give 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week. Like we want to meet families where they are at because of
Mhm.
the ROI of getting a good score.
Yep.
So we offer a bunch of options, you know, varying from 1 day to more long term, but our real flagship option that I think most families are drawn to is our SAT intensive. That's really our signature class. And students who join that class, you know, they get brought on an 8 week testing series. And basically what that entails is, you know, basically 8 weeks of 2.5 hour sessions. And in those sessions, we cover content, strategy, Desmos, actual real official practice tests to cover pacing. So that's really our signature option. Like if you have a student who wants to improve by, you know, 100, 150 points, this is our tried and true, like scientific method. If your kid puts in the work, like they will see the results.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that confidence that you have, and like you said, you've been doing this since you were a teenager, so you have the
Yes.
experience and you've seen it. So that's awesome. I know one other thing that you do is an assessment or a diagnostic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so that's a really, really wonderful question. So, the number one question I get, even more than when do we start, is which test do I take? Because
Mm-hmm.
there are so many things. I'm sure you see this, Dave, because we're both like pretty present on Facebook. There are so many like rumors that go around, like, oh, if you're good at science, take the ACT, or oh, if you're doing STEM, take the S. I don't even, I can't even keep track of all of them at this
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
honestly. I cannot stress enough, there is no simple formulaic if this, then that when it comes to standardized testing. Like these tests are so nuanced, and you will not know just from these general statements which test is better for your student. The
Mhm.
only way to know is to take a real SAT and a real ACT and then have a professional compare the results. Because
Mhm.
yes, it does matter what you feel more comfortable with, and that will
Sure.
come into the equation. But
Mhm.
objectively, when you know, when I'm looking at a score, my team is looking at a score, we're really analyzing it, not necessarily for which score at present is higher, but I'm looking really at the pacing. What types of questions are you getting right and wrong? Grammar
Mhm.
is an easier skill to improve than reading comprehension. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where is the math lagging? So you want somebody who has, like, you know what I mean? Who is able to be looking at this from a bird's eye view and 10 steps ahead, and who knows at the end of the day, after you put in the effort, these are you know what I mean? These are the types of questions we can definitely get right for
Hmm.
you. And that's
Yeah.
a service we offer for free to families because I know so many families, this is like the question I feel like that keeps them from starting prep because they
Yeah.
don't even know where to begin.
That's awesome. I'm going to put a link to the free assessment in the show notes today. You mentioned the Facebook rumors, and I don't know if it's a rumor or a question, but there seems to be some confusion about whether schools prefer the SAT or ACT. Is there a preference?
Oh, you're going to get me fired up with this one. So that's a really, honestly, there is, let me just, a short answer, absolutely not. There's
Yeah.
zero preference. Every 4 year American university college accepts either SAT or ACT with zero preference or favor to either one. I think this stems from like regional developments where kind of like the
Mm.
College Board was on the East Coast and the ACT was in the Midwest. So for whatever like societal cultural reason, people tend to like stick to a certain test or
Mhm.
depending on if you're an SAT or ACT state. But there's literally no reason. Like if your school offers the SAT as their test, but
Mhm.
you're thinking the ACT is a better fit for you, go take it at a local school. Like,
Yeah.
don't let anything other than the best test for you be the reason that you take a test.
Great advice. I love that. Jackie, this has been really informative. I love that we have set out this kind of reverse engineered timeline for people to use as a touchstone and North Star. Is there anything I missed that you would want people to know before we wrap up?
It's a wonderful question. And honestly, I think we covered the gamut of all things testing and reverse engineering. I just want to make sure that if anyone wants to join our SAT intensive or take the free assessment, we'll be providing the links for them. So we'll definitely go ahead and do that for everyone. But other than that, I think we have covered just about everything.
Great. Well, as always, love talking with you. You have such knowledge and wisdom that I know the listeners are going to get a lot from this, and I'm sure that we will have you back again in the near future. So thanks for joining us, Jackie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dave. Pleasure as always.